All right, everybody, welcome to another American Baitworks Live. We have finally got these things started back up. We had a little hiatus there during the late summer and the fall, but American Baitworks is back, and I have a really cool guest today, Justin Girard. It looks like we dressed each other, but maybe we just really love Freedom Tackle.
Yeah.
We're both going to wear the same shirt. So I
Yeah.
like it though. But man, I want to tell everybody a little bit about Justin. He's one of our pro staff from the American Baitworks, the whole American Baitworks umbrella. He does quite a few of the different brands. He is a Lake Simcoe expert. And for you guys that don't know Lake Simcoe, it is it's a really big lake that's up in Canada. It's not really far up there. It's about 3 or 4 hours from the American line. Maybe not quite that far.
Yeah, about that.
But it's an awesome lake. There's whitefish, if I'm not mistaken, lake trout too, right?
Yep.
Lake trout and amazing giant smallmouth bass. I mean, absolutely giant smallmouth bass. So we're going to kind of break down. We're mostly going to talk about ice fishing because it's getting to be that time of the year. Lake Simcoe, you guys are just starting to get some ice on Simcoe. Not quite enough to fish, though, the way I understand right now. But just within a week maybe or two, you guys should have plenty of ice up there to fish. So we're going to break some of that stuff down. And let's get started with the ice fishing. I'm sure it's gonna kind of twist a little bit and get into some other stuff. But tell me about the ice fishing on Lake Simcoe and like I know you're excited, Justin. I know you love it. How in the next, like I said, week or so, when you're gonna be getting some ice, where are you gonna start? Like take me through your first couple of days. Like, how's this gonna go down?
Well, for me, I'm primarily like a big water fishing guy, right? So right now there is some spots on Simcoe that are frozen for basically your perch and your pike. So I'll usually start there early, get my perch out of the way, get my freezer full of perch, and then. But my main thing, honestly, is when that main lake freezes, I'm walking out there on 2.5, 3 inches of ice with the spot and floater suits and buddies, and playing it safe, obviously, but. I want to get that first ice whitefish lake trout bite, which is it's unbelievable out there. Like you get on the shoal and it's lights out, and it's just so much fun because you're scratching the dust off. It's been a while, and it's just you're out on the open. And like I said, Simcoe's huge. It's I think for Americans is about 300 square miles, so that's how big the lake is. So it's huge, right? So I'm only focus on like a small part of Simcoe because it's so big. Like you just get overwhelmed by Lake Simcoe. Like if you look at a map, you're like, where do I start? And most guys are like, I don't know where to start. And I tell people, just break it down like a little pie. Just get that little piece, focus on it, learn the shoals, learn them all, and then master it. And then if you want to start exploring other areas, and go ahead. But it's just it's a big body of water. But that first couple days is like it's better than Christmas when you're a kid. It's like drilling that first hole and putting your fish finder down and watching those fish streak, and yeah, it's fun.
So tell me this. So when you say you're going to be first targeting the whitefish and the lake trout, so I'm sure you have some shoals that you already know about that are your favorite ones to go check out. Obviously, we all have spots that we like, but when you drop your fish finder down there, are you hoping not only obviously you want to see some arches, some streaks down there, but are you looking for bait too? And if so, what is the bait? Like, is there a certain kind? Is it smelt? Is it alewives? Is it perch? Like, see, I don't know much about whitefish,
Yeah,
so I've
yeah,
caught a few lake trout before, but I've
yeah.
never caught whitefish. Do they eat? Do the two eat the same things? Where are we going with that?
Yeah, so yes and no. So whitefish, when you're primarily fishing for whitefish, you're not looking for bait. So if we're gonna, well, let's separate so I don't confuse everybody. So we're talking about whitefish. You're not really looking for bait. You're looking for structure. You're looking for rocks, and you're looking for where gobies are gonna hang out. So like a smallmouth fisherman would do is find that bait fish that are, in the Great Lakes, those gobies. Those areas are the same key areas that I'm targeting during the wintertime for whitefish, and they hang out in the same spots. So I'm looking at my Navionics map or a structure map and saying, okay, here's a shoal. If you're looking at a shoal, then hit the top of it and it kind of scrolls down like that. I'm going to start early in the morning right on top of it, because early morning before that sun comes up, these fish are coming up feeding. and then they'll work their way down on these main kind of basins, right? So I'm looking at my map. I'm going to hit my first shoal on the top. Sometimes you drop it down and it's like first drop, you get a fish. Sometimes you're waiting 5-10 minutes, but 10 minutes, if I don't see anything streaking or nothing on the bottom, I'm out of there and I'm moving. I'm going to go down further the shoal or try another shoal. I don't waste too much time. It's guys are, set up their hut and they get their heater going. They're all nice and warm. And it's like, okay, I'll wait another half hour. I'll wait another half hour. Next thing you know, it's lunchtime and you don't have a fish on the ice. You're just wasting that morning.
Yeah, no, stay. I've always been a big fan of staying on the move, and that's always been real good. Let's hit a couple of comments here before we move into the kind of the little precursor. That was the precursor of our whitefish deal, and before we go into a little pre-deal of the lake trout, let's hit a couple of these. From Jacob, he says, "What's up, JT? Hey, what's up, buddy?" Luke, Canada, Melbourne, Florida in the house. I live in Palm Bay. That's right north of me. I'm sure it's probably warmer where Luke is right now than where I am. I'm actually in Spirit Lake, Iowa right now. I'm up here doing some work for Major League Fishing. So I'm up here in the not quite as far as you are, Justin, but I'm up here in the Great White North too.
Yeah.
Michael says, I can't even imagine what ice fishing is like. I'll be on Headwaters on Friday. I'll be out there Sunday. It says the water's 72 degrees. I was out there the other day. It wasn't 72 degrees. It might be 72 degrees outside, but it's not 72 degrees there. Jacob also said, I've seen ice fishing on TV and always been interested in it, just not a lot of ice fishing in Louisiana.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Either. I can assure you of that. Dylan says, can't wait for the whitey grounds to freeze up. So that's kind of what you were talking about, Justin. You said back in the bays, that most of that is frozen now, where you guys actually can get out and fish on that now, just out in that main body of the lake, that it's not frozen.
No, it's kind of like we call it Cook's Bay, and like the south end is very shallow, so that freezes first. So right now, we're hopefully in the next couple of weeks, it's going to start locking up the main lake. Like I said, it's a big body of water, so it takes some really cold weather and some calm nights to lock that lake down. Once it's locked up, as long as we keep the snow off of it and a couple of cold nights, she'll freeze up quick. But the problem is we'll get a skim of water great overnight, and then the wind blows and that blows that whole ice off, and then you're kind of starting from scratch. So it's always like ice fishermen up here in Lake Simcoe are like crossing their fingers. Okay, calm nights. Let's get this cold weather. Let's get out there, because the season opens January 1st, and it's very rare that you get out there on opening day. I have a couple times, but it's very rare. Usually the second week of January, you're kind of getting ready to go. This year is going to be a little later. I'm cross my fingers for the first week of February, hopefully. But we just need some cold weather. But yeah, like if you want to go fishing right now, you got the south end. You're going to have some perch and pike, but then most of the guys are waiting for that main lake to freeze up. That way you have access to the entire lake and you can go everywhere.
Yeah. So I will be honest with you with this now. I've never eaten a whitefish. I have eaten lake trout, but I can tell you this. You're talking about those yellow perch or those ring perch.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys out of the ice, I mean, that is some of just absolutely sweet meat. They're not a real big fish. So they don't get a lot of, popularity as being something that's going to just, it's going to take you forever to get it up out of the hole. But man, perch tastes so good. So that's almost got to be like kind of like a little starter kit, if you will. You know what I mean? Like that's, if that's the first place the ice goes, but then you at least get some fish in the freezer, get to have a couple of fish fries before you move out and go for the whitefish and the lake trout. So
yeah, 100%.
We got a couple more popping up here. Luke also said, or Michael Walsh says, air is 82 and the water is 62. 62 degrees. That's what it was when I found that out a couple days ago when I was out there.
Our water's 32 right now, or 32 Celsius right now, so which is below your freezing. So.
Kim says hi from Canada.
Hi, Kim.
Whitefish are delicious. I'm sure.
For sure.
Noticed, and like I said, I've personally never eaten a whitefish, but any freshwater fish out of cold water really seem to taste really, really good. Like I've caught freshwater fish like walleye and catfish and stuff like that out of hot water in the summertime, down here in the States.
Yeah.
And they just not so good. But you catch the same fish out of the same lake in the wintertime, or when the water's say in the 50s or in the 40s or even colder. But that same fish will taste so much better out of that cold water, which is kind of weird because like I do a lot of saltwater. Living in Florida, I do a lot of saltwater fishing too, and the ocean temperature can be really hot, and you catch a grouper in the summer or in the winter, and it tastes just as good. So I'm not a biologist, so
me neither.
and why saltwater fish doesn't taste nasty out of hot water, but a freshwater fish does. But
yeah, like I won't eat the whitefish in the summertime. I'll target them in the springtime all the way till like June, and then I stop because then they move deeper. And then I've tried keeping them like in July, and they don't taste the same like you said. It's not worth it. Leave them alone, and we'll get them in the wintertime.
it's not the same. Alexander says having a hard sometimes locating whitefish off the west shore of Simcoe. Do you recommend trying the shoals in the main basin? That's a good question for you, Justin.
Yeah, like shoals are your number one. You find the shoals, find out where. I mean, you want it kind of a deeper, like the 60 feet flat, and then it goes up to up to 25. Like you'll catch whitefish in 5 feet of water if you wanted to in certain parts of the lake. I mostly focus on that 25 to 35 foot top of the shoal, work my way down up to like 50, 60. I don't go deeper than 60 usually. You can catch them way deeper. Like Simcoe goes all the way deep as like 130 feet. But like that's the thing with the wintertime, they can be all over the place, but usually they will hang around those shoals. And just kind of I guess my advice would be just start on the top, work your way down, and don't be afraid to just pack up and move. And you don't have to move far. I tell guys when you move 50 feet. Because sometimes I'll be fishing there, there's zero on the screen, nothing. I'll just take a walk 50 feet, drill a hole, and boom, it's like loaded. It's like, I don't know what it is with them, but with whitefish, they're kind of like, they have the section and they're going to stick to it and they're not going to veer off. Even though they can see your lure, they're probably like, I'm not going over there. I don't want to.
I don't want to run that far.
Yeah, exactly.
Bring it a little closer to me.
Yeah, it's exactly it.
Right. That's pretty cool. Let's hear hear from Jacob again. He said, for someone who has never ice fished, is there a certain depth or thermocline layer that I am looking for? And where do you start when you're trying to find? So in the wintertime, that's a good, I'm kind of interested in the question too, as well as Jacob. Is there a thermocline in the wintertime when the water's that cold?
Some people say yes. I say no because we call it when the water flips. So right now, like before the water, how the flipping of the water happens, right? And the cold weather comes in, the warm weather. So the same with Simcoe, like around November, December, it'll flip. And that's when everything's mixed together and it's all the same temperature from top to bottom. And I think in wintertime, it's just the same. And that's why you can catch those lake trout and whitefish in like 5 feet of water. Guys are perch fishing, catching 25-pound lake trout. So these lakers love it because they can go anywhere and they feel comfortable because that water is cold. And whitefish and lake trout primarily are cold water species. So wintertime for them is like, Christmas for us, right? They're like, I could go anywhere. I can eat anything. I don't care. So
I can only imagine a 25-pound lake trout getting up there in that shallow stuff where those ring perch or yellow perch are. I'll guarantee you those lake trout are hammering those perch. There's not mine.
I have a couple holes where it's about 18 feet and you're looking down and you're sight fishing these lake trout and you can tell they're big because they're all scarred up and they're just scoring the bottom and you can tell and that's where I'll feed them like bottom baits because they're just sucking stuff off the bottom. I call them big lazy lakers, especially when they come up that shallow and you just lay it flat there and they'll come in and squirry and they'll just suck it up and then have fun. Try to land those ones. They got the upper hand, I'll tell you that.
I guarantee you. Let's hit a couple more of these comments. Here's one from Christina. It's been a fun start with the speckle opener up north. Fantastic eating. What's a speckle, Justin?
It's a mix between a lake trout and a speckled trout.
Oh, okay.
Or sorry, that's a flake. Sorry, speckled trout is basically, it looks like a brook trout, if you want to call that.
Yep.
My buddy just sent me pictures of flake. That's why I have it in my head. He just went out fishing today, sent me the pictures. I'm like, homeschooling his kids, and he brought them ice fishing and catching some splake. So, yeah, no, they're beautiful fish. And usually these smaller lakes are stocked with speckles. So that's the first to freeze. So if you want to scratch the itch when those, Lake Simcoe's not frozen, you're going to drive up north and you're going to find those small lakes that nobody fishes. And you got to, backpack through the forest and through this beautiful lake and drill a hole and have some fun. And you have the lake to yourself.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Tony. What's up, buddy? Glad to see you back. Hey, Tony, good to see you too. Let's see. Frank says, "What's your go-to baits for lake trout and whitefish?" Okay, so we talked a little bit about how we're going to get started as soon as kind of the more of the main basin of what you call the Cooper's Bay. Is that right?
Cook's Bay.
Bay.
Yeah.
So it's the main basin of Cook's Bay starts to freeze up. You talked about for the whitefish, you're going out there. We're going to find some shoals. Start early in the morning on top of the shoals. As the day progresses, they'll kind of move down off the sides of the shoals. What baits are we going to be using doing that? You know what? And let me add something to what Frank's asking. Tell me about depths, baits and depths.
Yeah, like I said, some guys stick to the deep part of Simcoe and they're fishing 90 feet to 120 feet consistently all winter, and they'll catch both whitefish and lake trout. You're going to be using pretty much the same types of baits: some bottom baits, some spoons, some swim baits. A lot of swim baits catch a lot of lake trout and whitefish on Lake Simcoe. Some lipless crankbaits. Obviously, with Set the Hook with their drifters, that's kind of what I like. I like bottom baits. That's my preferred method, is to kind of finesse fish. But like I said, one section will be deep fish mostly. And then for me, I like the shallow, 18 feet to 50 feet, 60 at the max I'll fish. And I'll start with bottom baits. The blade bait I've only used it for one ice season because it just came out not too long ago, and it's killer. I brought one here. So if anyone has seen it, the blade bait looks a little different because I took the front hooks off, but they're just basically such a versatile lure. And with these whitefish, because they're eating gobies a lot, you just want to bounce that off the top. So put your swivel in the back hole, and then just bounce that off bottom like that. These fish will come up and just suck that up. And I tweak my baits. I'll put a little tube, like a crappie tube in the back of it, just to give it a little bit of flair.
Right.
I'm always tinkering with baits. I never kind of take one out of the package and I'll fish it out of the package, but I'll always kind of do my own stuff to try to get that leading edge, right? But
we all do that.
Yeah. And then there's obviously like the drifter. Like this has been just unbelievable the last couple of years. I mean, gobies are the main staple out there right now for whitefish, and lake trout are eating a lot of gobies. Sure. So any bottom baits there, you're going to catch fish. Doesn't mean like, you're going to catch them on spoons or swim baits or crankbaits at all. Like I think with Simcoe, there's so many different baits that you can use. You just kind of, what I do is pick one, learn it, observe it, catch fish with it, and then move on to the next one to find out what works best, what you like better on certain days. But it's just, to come and tell you what to use, start with the bottom bait, goby, finesse them, and then if you want to go more aggressive, get yourself some spoons, swim baits, and lipless cranks and rattles, anything that makes a noise, attract them. And then it depends on the mood, right? It's like any type of fishing, whether you're bass fishing, you're pike fishing, whatever you are. Watch your sonar, see what the fish's mood is that day, and then, switch to what they want.
Right. So let me ask you this. So that blade bait, that's from Freedom, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that blade bait, are you like, so I know when you pull one of those blade baits, I'm not used to fishing them through the ice, but I do fish, but you cast them, and I'm going to relate this. I cast it out there, let it go to the bottom. Like when you lift it, you feel that, and the Freedom one especially, it's got a really hard wobble to it. And then you kind of let it soak back to the bottom and then kind of reel it. So when you're fishing it vertically straight down, are you kind of doing the same thing, or are you fishing it a little bit differently? Are you fishing it different from day to day, trying to see just what the fish's mood is? And I guess my question is, do you ever find a time when that, like you just lifting it hard straight up and then letting it, because that thing doesn't fall back down. When the guys at Freedom designed that thing, it doesn't just nosedive back down. When it vibrates up, and then it kind of sachets when it comes back down. So do you just fish it really slow, bouncing it on the bottom all the time, or do you get more aggressive with it?
Yeah, like when I first drop it down, I'm going aggressive. I want to see if there's anything nearby. Let's get them in here. So I'll put it down, bounce off bottom, rip it up once, let it hit the bottom as hard as you can. I do that about 2-3 times, and then I'll wait. I'll just pause it, leave it on bottom just so it's flat, and then watch my fish finder. If I don't see any action within a minute, I'll do it again. I'll keep going. And as soon as I see action, I'll put it right back down the bottom and let that nose dive in that dirt or the soot they call it. Because what happens is, think about a whitefish or any fish really. They're out there, they see something flash, and then you go back down the bottom. They're like, "Oh, I got you now," right? They're gonna come and see it. What was that, right? I'm gonna get it. It's going away. So you kind of want to say trick them, but you're basically saying, "Come over here, yeah, come see me." Oh, you weren't supposed to see me. I'm gonna come hide down there, and that's what gobies do. They'll come up real high and then they'll go down. They're hiding behind rocks, right? And that's the same thing. You want to create that. Once they come in, again, day to day, like sometimes aggressive, boom, boom, boom. You're really taking it off 2-3 inches off bottom, and then they're hitting it as you're coming up to do another little jig, and they're like, "Oh, there, my line's tight," and your hooks. I got some wild hook sets, so I got to make sure my hut roof is a little bit open for me. But and then other times, you know what, you can go as aggressive as you want, and you'll see them come in and just take off, and they want nothing to do with it right now. So that's when you'll kind of pull up a more finesse bait. We do a lot of drop shotting too, kind of later in the year. We'll do a bottom bait, and then probably about 3-4 feet above, we'll do a drop shot with small plastics, crappy tubes. Use a drifter, you can use that. So many different types of baits you can use on top, because as the year progresses, these fish kind of get, say, spooky. Like, just so you guys know, Lake Simcoe is the most ice fish. It's most populated in the wintertime. Like, everyone fishes Lake Simcoe. If anyone's near Lake Simcoe, they've been ice fishing there, and it's busy. Like, it's a pressured lake, mostly in the wintertime, because if you think about it, I can walk in certain section of the lake. I can walk 150 feet and be in lake trout whitefish grounds. So if you don't have a boat and don't have access to go hit those deep shoals in the wintertime, that's your time to go do that and catch huge fish. Like, that's exciting for anybody, right? Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Let's hit a couple more of these comments. Here's Robert says, "What's up?" Yeah, I'm waiting. What's up for you? Let's hit Christopher. Waiting for our bass opener to put my Halo HD3 extra heavy to work. Coming weather. I hear that, my friend. Here's Christina again. She says, "Does Simcoe have a good population of black crappie?" That's a good question.
Not very. It's not a big population. No, it's not.
Yeah.
You're gonna have guys catch them,
right?
But it's a very, say, it's secretive for the crappie holes, but there are some good holes. It's just people don't. It's not something you see like advertised everywhere. So there are a few in the springtime you'll go and get them, but they're in there. There's almost 50 species in Lake Simcoe, so there's a lot of fish in there to be caught. So
that's pretty diverse.
Yeah, the primary, obviously, your yellow perch, your smallmouth bass, your lake trout, your whitefish, your pike, and then you go to burbot and ling and keep going down the line that way. But that's your primary source of people coming in for that specifically.
Jacob says, "Do brush piles play a big part in ice fishing?" You guys put a lot of brush. I think in a lot of the Canadian lakes, there's so much weed cover that you probably don't put a lot of brush.
I'll tell you know what's good cover is sunken snowmobiles, four-wheelers, somebody's anchor, like an old ice hut that someone never picked out of off the ice when it was starting to melt. Those are great holes for not only lake trout and whitefish, but for bass come the summertime. So, but not for winter. We're not looking for brush piles in the winter, to be honest, and stuff like
that. Jeff says, "What kind of electronics do you use?"
I'm using a Humminbird Helix 7. I put it on ice modes. I'm using kind of like a split screen flasher and my sonar. I prefer sonar to flasher. Some guys are just primarily flasher. It's all really preference, to be honest. I think with whitefish, a sonar is a little better, in my opinion, just as much as you can see. Because, like I said, they're bottom feeders. So with a sonar, you can really, if that bottom is soft, you can kind of see the little indent in the bottom when the fish are coming close. I brought guys out who are flasher guys and be like, "Hey, there's a fish." They're like, "No, it's not." I'm like, "Just wait a second." And all of a sudden, oh yeah, there's a fish. You just see his back kind of come up, right? You just learn, like, because my eyes, obviously, like anybody else, is glued to that sonar. Like, I got the sonar in front of me, the hole right there, and my rod kind of. So I want to watch my rod tip and the sonar at the same time, because these fish sometimes will just, you'll miss a lot of bites if you're not paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's one from Cheryl, and I don't know this, but I'm obviously you're probably going to know this. Hey, Justin, my wife says you're a big Habs fan, so to using
I'm not a Habs fan,
robbers this year.
but we had a bet in the winter for the playoffs that the Habs would lose against Pittsburgh, and because I cheer for the Penguins, and they lost against the Habs, so I owe her a little. I got a little bet that I lost there, so that's probably what she's trying to get back to me at. So because NHL starts today in Canada, as you know, we're all hockey freaks, just like it's like the football of America, right? And NHL starts tonight, so it's a big day for us.
Let's hear from Michael. He says, with the water that cold, are the fish very aggressive or are they somewhat lethargic? In Florida, below 60 degrees, you can poke a bass in the head with your rod. I don't know about that, but now down to 60 really fast from 80, you might be able to do that. But yeah, is there times when they're pretty aggressive?
Oh yeah, I'd say we call it like in February usually. We have like a week or two where they call it February blahs, and everyone calls it that because there's like a week or two where fish are just like not responding to anything. They're just in their own little world. And I don't know I've talked to biologists and guys who fish Simcoe for 50 years, and they said, hey, 50 years ago, February was always, you have a week or two where you can throw everything at them. You might catch a fish here and there. You'll catch them. It's just not like it is first ice and last ice. But for the most part, they are super aggressive. Like the lake trout, the perch, and whitefish they go bananas. Like that's why it's so much fun. You're fishing a 32 to 40-inch rod on 6-pound test, 10-pound braid, and you're going not. It's a good fight. It's fun. And through a hole, you got to make sure you get through that hole and you don't get the hooks caught on the side and it's panic.
So there's a term I just heard you use that I haven't heard yet tonight. You said about last ice. When typically on Lake Simcoe is last ice? When is your ice season pretty much over?
It's like it changes every year. It seems like with sometimes we'll get like whitefish and lake trout close on March 15th. That's the last day of the season, but perch are open all year. So usually after March 15th, the main lake is starting to get a little funky, and you might get a couple more weeks if it was still open out there. But usually mid March is kind of like let's get off here. Huts have to be off. You can still go on the lake, but you're only targeting the yellow perch because that's the only thing open. So yeah, usually last ice typically will be like end of March.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the yellow perch are more shallow.
Yeah, they'll be shallow, especially last ice. Springtime, they're going to get ready to get spawning, and there's some big jumbos. You'll get 14 inchers, 13-inch perch, and just big bellies, and it's fun. So we'll do that. If the ice is still good, we're going to go out after March 15th when whitefish are closed and go get our buckets of perch and get the boats ready for spring.
Let's hear from Steve. He says, I use silver and gold blade baits. Do you recommend painted baits, and does it affect vibration?
No, silver and gold are awesome. That's one of my favorite colors right here. Well, this is the goby color. I do like the silver black. Any like dark, like gobies come in different colors. Like there's some light colored browns, there's some darkers. But to be honest, like some blue and some chartreuse, some days will outfish those natural colors. So that's why don't be afraid to change. I have 6-7 rods at a time, and I'll put it down. That market fish doesn't need it. Let's change that. Let's put another color on. Let's see what they want today. Like anything else, I'm sure with bass fish and JT, you're the same, right? Some days they want that white. Sometimes they want chartreuse.
So a lot of times there's some certain situations in bass fishing where it's not true, but most of the time when you have just a darker situation, whether that's stained water, whether it's early or late in the day, whether it's overcast conditions, usually if you have a little bit darker water, typically a little bit brighter baits, and it depends. I'm not talking about going straight chartreuse all the time, but there's a line in there, where you might want to get something a little brighter, and then as the sun gets up or the water's clearer, you might want to go a little more subtle. But yeah, I've noticed that, and I'm sure that even under the ice, those fish they're still at high noon, they can still see better than they can at dawn and dusk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Times even throughout the day when changing different colors of them, not just on forage and forage color and trying to match the color of the forage alone, but just in general, you just so they can see it better. If a fish is aggressive and he can see something from 15 feet away instead of from 4 feet away, he's going to run over there and bite it. You know what I'm saying? Whereas on a day when the water's clear and he's not as aggressive, and it takes to where you're dangling something supernatural right in front of his face to get him to eat it. So I'm sure the same thing. Now with Steve's the back end of Steve's question, we can kind of both answer this for him because I've used blade baits a good bit too. Like I said, just not actually on the ice. But in my opinion, yes, Steve, the painted ones typically do not feel like. And I'm gonna. This isn't technical, but I'm gonna explain something here a little bit. The painted ones feel to me like they don't thump, as in like when you're lifting a blade bait and it goes like that. They don't feel to me like they thump as sharp. And now that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that's why, even like to use a bass fishing terminology, why some days certain lipless crankbaits work better than others, because some days they want that hard thump, some days they want that more subtle thump. So I think the painted ones, they will still thump as hard, but it's not that real tight or sharp thump, if you will. Like that, I don't know. That's it. I may not be explaining that exactly the way
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Different feel, but it's still it's not like it's completely, just dulling it out and it doesn't thump at all anymore. Just instead of being like, it's more kind of like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm making noises.
Yeah.
I've been an idiot for 46 years. I'm not changing now.
No, why bother?
But so is that kind of what you think too on that deal?
Yeah, like another thing to point out, Lake Simcoe is a super clear body of water. They'll be appearing in the wintertime, especially if the lake doesn't freeze all at the same time, where it will get murky because it's still open at one end of the lake, and if the wind's blowing a certain way offshore, it's going to get that water murky. But some days you can see 35, close to 30 feet, down. So you can find a 30-foot shoal and you'll be able to see bottom. Like that's how clear it can get sometimes. And in the summertime, it'll get just as clear as that. Sometimes you see as deep as 40 feet. Like it's just unbelievable. So
here's a question from somebody that's actually on the show a good bit. A buddy of mine, Walter, says, and this goes right into what you're talking about. So this may be a dumb question. It's not, especially if Walter asks it. It's not. How does the oxygen in the water replenish when the lake is completely frozen over? So like there's no wind, to be stirring it up and everything. Like that's a legitimate question, because I mean obviously the water's plenty oxygenated because the fish live. You guys are whacking on them. Like,
yeah.
But I don't know. And maybe you're not a biologist and can't answer it either.
But I'll give you the fisherman, my pretend biologist. I guess there's lots of.
I didn't want anything official. I wanted whatever you're going to feed me, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, there's lots of cracks. What happens in Simcoe is such a big body of water. Lots of pressure cracks form. So everywhere, there's always the same areas where cracks happen. And sometimes you'll have 6-foot open cracks. So there's always, call it air going through it, but there's always open water, put it that way, on Simcoe during the ice fishing season. There's lots of rivers going through. Everyone punching holes. Like I said, there's a lot of people fish Lake Simcoe, so it's Swiss cheese by February. There's holes everywhere, so it's getting plenty of oxygen that way. But yeah, it does. It's not as obviously plentiful as if it was open water, and that's why if you have a really hard winter, you'll get a fish die off, and it's usually like smaller fish will die off, and you'll see them kind of floating on shore, and there is a little bit of a die off. But for the most part, these fish are great. Like they know where the oxygen's come from. If they need it, they'll go find those cracks. They'll find those open holes. They'll go a little bit shallower where the shoreline's been busted up from trucks going on and off. So they find a way.
Gotcha. Let's do a couple of these real quick, just so we don't get too far behind on these comments here. Let's hear from Jeff. Says, what line on the blade baits? Good question.
I would start with 8-pound fluoro, 10-pound braid, and then as the season progresses, and if I'm shallower, I will go to 6-pound fluoro. One thing to remember on the blade bait, if you're going to be using it a lot, I take the front hooks off. Not necessary, really. Where I'm fishing too, a lot of rocks, a lot of boulders. They'll get caught on there sometimes when you're bouncing bottom. There's some moss or whatever, they'll get caught on there. And what I found too, if you're really working the bait aggressively, the line might get caught sometimes on those front hooks because you are bouncing it off bottom and you're doing one of these, and sometimes it gets flipped around. So I take those front hooks off, and but yeah, 8-pound fluoro. You need fluoro on Simcoe, 100%. There's no ifs or buts about it.
I would think so. If you're talking about at some points throughout the season, you can see the bottom 30 feet. Yeah, you're going to need to be using some fluorocarbon line for sure. Steve says, I'm targeting smallies and white perch mostly, bycatcher, pike, and brown trout. We really get a good number of smallies and whiteys on the 1/4 ounce silver blade. I personally have I've caught a lot of smallmouth on. I've caught a few largemouth, but I've caught a lot of smallmouth over the years in cold weather situations on I use a 1/2 ounce blade bait more often than a 1/4, but typically it was windy and it was hard to control the 1/4 ounce. And I'm sure when you guys are fishing through the ice, that it's really not that much. You can get away with a lot smaller one. Christina's back and says, would you use white tubes for Lakers on Simcoe in the winter? I saw you had a little tube bait on the back of that Freedom blade bait.
Yeah, I did. Well, it's kind of like a shark ball. It's kind of a brownish color with more of a tan colored right on the back. White is a great color. There's lots of Cisco's or herons, whatever you want to call them, on Simcoe. So white's always been your traditional lake trout bait, and it still works amazing on Lake Simcoe for Lakers and whiteys. You'll catch whitefish. They'll come chase up a 4 to 6 inch tube or even a swim bait. They'll chase it up like a lake trout will and eat it.
So when you're talking about using a swim bait, whether it's for a whitefish or a lake trout, are you just dropping it straight to the bottom and then just lifting it up a foot? Are you reeling it up 10 feet and dropping it back down? How are you fishing that? Because obviously you can't be casting it. We're going straight down.
Yeah, we call it yo-yoing. So like a yo-yo, you'll put it all the way down, you'll reel up. Let's say we're fishing in 60 feet, just for argument's sake. I'll put it all the way down the bottom, reel it up to about 30 feet, and then put it back down, reel it up to about 30 feet, and then just keep doing that. And then if they're not too aggressive, I'll just leave it hang, let it hang there. So this is, one of the things like little hair jig that we'll use, right? But you'll let it hang about 30 feet off bottom, right in the middle of the column, and just put your rod down and let it sit there. And you'll see a fish streak up, come get it. As soon as you see that fish come, grab your rod and start reeling it away and let them chase it, and boom, it's game on. But if you want to fish both, I don't do that too often because I'm too busy with whitefish. But if you're a little bored in the afternoon and you want to fish your 2 lines, use your 2-line limit, put one halfway up, and then fish your bottom for your whitefish. Have fun with whitefish, and then just watch. And whitefish will come hit those top baits too. But if you're looking for a laker, just leave that bait up there. White tube is. A lot of people get away from the white tube. They're all going to swim baits and lipless cranks, but do not overlook the white tube because it always catches fish, especially on those slow days.
It's funny you were talking about when you're looking at your sonar and you see that laker or that whitefish coming streaking up at your bait, and you said don't let it sit there, try to get it away from them. There's so many times in fishing, whether it's bass fishing or the one thing that really popped into my head, and I'm just going to share this little saltwater story a little bit. Since we're talking ice, we're talking bass, we'll talk a little bit of saltwater fishing too, but there's cobia, really good eating fish all over the east coast of the United States and then the Gulf of Mexico too. But we sight fish those a lot in the springtime. So you just get out there and get out in 40 or 60 feet of water off the beach, and basically you just start idling and you'll see 2 or 3 of them will be up there just swimming along the top. They mostly run 40 to 60 pounds, something like that, but so many times you throw a bait out in front of them and they either hit it when it hits the water, like it hits the water and they just run over there and just grab it, or they'll run up to it and then they'll just fade off. But what I've learned over the years is the ones that do that, if you start reeling real hard, just start ripping it and like it's trying to get away, dude, they will spin on a dime and run right back over there to the same bait on the same cast that they just turned their nose up at it and said, no, thanks, that's fake. Turn around and it will be so far down their throat by the time you set the hook that it's almost like like me messing with my girlfriend's cats. You know what I mean? Like if you just throw something on the floor, they'll go over there and look at it and walk away from it. But if you got a little piece of fishing line tied to it, start trying to pull it away from it, he's right back over there on it. And it's like fish are like they're like house cats. They really are.
100%.
They are. They're like the same thing. Like if he thinks it's getting away, it's fine. And so many times too. Here's another example of that too, of how you can actually turn fish on. So like when the bass, the largemouth bass get done spawning down here in the southern part of the United States, they start to move offshore a little bit and they'll really group up. But believe it or not, sometimes they'll be pretty lethargic. So there'll be this big school of fish down there in 16, 18, 22 feet of water. And you can actually be throwing a jig or a crankbait or whatever at them, and you'll feel your bait bouncing off the fish. Like they're not biting it, like you're reeling that crankbait, and you'll feel it just kind of like you can feel something's alive, and like, but you know it's a school of fish because you've already idled across it and you marked it, you put a waypoint on it, and you lined up on it. But when you get one of them to fire, one bites, all hell breaks loose for about 15 minutes.
Really?
That one just, he's fighting as you're reeling him in. He's fighting. It will ignite that entire school.
Wow.
And you just sit there and fish them for like 20 minutes, nothing. And then when you get that one to fire, it does that. Like I said, it just all of a sudden they were all down there minding their own business. And
it's like you in the party, right? It's like, you get them.
Freak out. And now they're all like, "Whoa, what, are we eating? Is it time to eat? What's going on here?" You know what I mean? So, but it's so funny to hear you as soon as you said that, like just instantly off of my mind. Like I said, saltwater bass fishing, all this kind of stuff. But it's like you are literally teasing those fish, and it's interesting to just hear. Like I said, from ice fishing to saltwater fishing to bass fishing,
comes full circle. It's just
fishing is fishing. It's there's idiosyncrasies to everything, and I don't mean an idiot like me. I mean idiot to everything. But that's one of them. Like it's the tease, it's the chase, it's the game. That's what the fish really like.
Yeah.
Some of these comments real quick. Steve said he agrees with us. Well, at least somebody does. Tony says yes with a large sucker minnow on it. So that's a question. I know we've been talking about all these freedom baits tonight and everything. Do you guys ever use any live bait up there?
I personally don't. There's still a lot of guys that use live bait. They'll use they call it a spreader. I don't know if you've ever seen a spreader, but basically like you'll get 2 or 3 hooks on it with a weight in the middle, so they just hang off the side. And people drop down on a tip up, they call it, and they just let it hang there. And the fish will come and suck it up, and your tip up will go up, and then basically a stick, we call it a tip up, right? Grab it, and you hand bomb it, right? No rod and reel, it's just all by hand. That's the old school method. It still works to this day. People are still doing it, still catching fish. I personally, minnows, it's a pain to go, buy minnows, and you got to keep them alive, and your hands get all dirty, and you miss a fish, and you got to redo the bait. It's just, I don't. But yeah, it's still. A lot of guys still use live bait and have great success. No problem.
Steve says, with braid, you can feel it good too. No, absolutely you can. Back to Tony. He says, even with that big sucker minnow, you add a trailer hook too. Michael Walsh, cold water holds more oxygen than warm water.
Well, there you go.
I'm not a biologist. Maybe Michael is, maybe he's not, but I would have to think I would agree with that, because the only thing I do know about thermocline and all that kind of stuff is that in the summertime, when the water's really hot on the lakes in the southern part of the United States, water will get 88 and 90 degrees. That's when we really see that thermocline separation, and you can see it on your graph.
Yeah,
like it's really, really prevalent in these southern lakes, and you won't mark, like if the thermocline's at like 28 feet, you won't mark a fish under 28 feet hardly at all. Because like all the oxygen is from 28 feet to the surface.
Yeah.
Idle out across the main, like a perfect example is Lake Lanier in Georgia, just north of Atlanta. You can idle across Lake Lanier on an August afternoon, and there'll be just fish. You'll be in 120 feet of water, and there'll be a school of fish underneath your boat at 28 feet and nothing below it, but everything. It's crazy.
Wow.
And one of the best ways to fish then is to find, because those fish, like, it's almost like they want to be as deep as they can, but still be able to breathe.
Yeah.
Like if it's established at 28 feet, you idle around and try to find all the points or humps that has a brush pile that's like right there. Like not at 26 or 24 or 32, like right there at that 28. And that's kind of a deal that really works out well. Steve says almost all of our fish are pinned to the bottom. Do you get them up in the column under the ice?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you will. You'll like I said, you'll get fish, especially early ice and late ice. You'll get them coming all over the water column. They'll come chase those baits. Primarily you will target the bottom, but some guys who I know guys, they'll just fish mid column all the time. They're fishing 60 feet, they're fishing at 30 feet, and they'll catch whitefish all day long, lake trout, and just focus on those aggressive fish, right? It's all on what you want to do. Like there's aggressive fish everywhere. I just got to go find them. I like the lethargic fish. I like challenging myself and bottom and get them to bite. That's what I get a thrill to do. But absolutely, you'll get them come up for sure.
So we're kind of getting close to the end of our time here, but I want to ask you a couple of questions about the smallmouth fishing, and not necessarily through the ice, but about the smallmouth fishing on Simcoe. I've heard so much about it, just absolute giants up there. But let me ask you this. So one of the things I've heard about Simcoe is absolutely giants up there, but it's not like, let's say, a Lake St. Clair, where you're expecting to go to St. Clair and catch 40 to 60 bass a day. Now you might not catch a 5 bass limit as big as you're going to on Simcoe, but you're expecting to catch 40 to 60 bass in a day. Once again, a lot of them being 2 or 3 pounders.
Yeah.
But Simcoe, the way I understand, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand, it's not like that. Like it has bigger fish, but you're not expecting to have 50 or 60 fish days.
There are some guys, like I'm not, and everyone who knows me knows I'm not a bass fisherman. I'll go out a couple of times and stuff like that, but I follow it a lot. I have a lot of friends who just fish for bass, and I'm so interested in it, but I'm busy salmon fishing in the summer. But to answer your question, guys who you have that kind of pocket of fish of 2-3 pounders where you can catch 30, 40 in the morning or afternoon, whatever you're fishing, no problem. But primarily you're going to Simcoe, you want to catch that 7 to close to 8 pound smallmouth bass, right? So yeah, you're going to catch, one of my good friends, Jay Clay, who's set the record on Simcoe, or really, I think it's Ontario record for, I think 30, close to 32 pounds for a 5 bass limit during a tournament. They were throwing back 6 pounders, put it that way, right? When they were fishing. And I think he had caught 25 or 30 fish that day during the tourney to get that big bag. But some guys are super, like I said, Simcoe is super tough. You love to hate it, but those big bags, that's what guys go there for, is those big 5+ pound smallies. And some guys are super good at it and they can do it consistently. But yeah, you're not catching 50, 60, 5 pounder, that's for sure. But yeah.
So how are those guys targeting those really big ones? Like I know you guys, you don't fish for them up there during the spawn, or maybe when your season opens, it's right at the very tail end of the spawn. And typically, and once again, tell me if I'm wrong, but typically most of the big bass, whether they're smallmouths up north or largemouths down south, typically the big ones spawn pretty early in the cycle. And I would assume that Simcoe smallies are probably the same. So they're not targeting them when they're on the beds in the spring. So are they targeting? Are they on the same shoals that you're out there catching whitefish on through the ice, or are they targeting them some different way?
They'll be there in the fall, those same spots where we're going for whitefish. In the fall, they'll be there, and that's where guys will get their deep smallies in 30, 40, 50 feet of water. But primarily when the season starts, fourth Saturday of basically end of June is when it opens up. Guys are sight fishing these fish. They're fishing in 3 to 6 feet of water. They're making long casts with a lot of tubes. Tubes are kind of like the staple out there, goby tubes. A lot of guys are.
It works too. The set the hook drifter, I'm sure, works really good.
Oh yeah. So that with the tubes, a lot of jerk baits. Guys are just love jerk baits, spinner baits. The typical stuff you'll catch fish on. But When I do first go for smallies, I just like sight fishing them. I go just to look at them because it's so awesome. I'm not a bass fisherman, so for me to go and watch these big fish just like swimming around, it's a thrill. So I get why guys are obsessed with it.
So, but when you're sight fishing them up there, so you're talking about it's the very end of June, 1st of July. They're not actually still on the beds, right? They're just still kind of up there, like they haven't moved off deeper.
Yeah, they're close to their beds this year. I know because it was a late ice and everything was late. The water was cold. They were still hanging around their beds, but they were done spawning. Everything was good. So when the season opened, it was kind of guys were happy because like they're close to their beds and they're schooled up, and you're catching 12, 15 bass no problem in an hour. But a lot of drop shotting happens, right? A lot of drop shots and tubes.
Yeah. So when you held up that set the hook drifter there at the beginning of our show, what is that little your jig head that's on it there?
Oh, it's a flatty jig head. So Set the Hook makes these. Basically, makes I'll just take it off to show you guys. Just like that. So basically, your drifter will sit flat on there. It's got a little bait catcher there, and then you'll just flip it on. It's just so you can have a nice vertical or a nice horizontal presentation right on bottom, right? So that drifter sits nice and straight, and then obviously your eyelets here, and you're just kind of crawling that on the bottom, jigging it a bit, wiggling that tail, and
so Set the Hook actually makes that
yeah,
big head.
Yeah. It's called a flatty jig head.
Flatty
Flatty jig. I don't know what they call it head at the end, but it's flatty jig. Yeah.
Right. No, that's pretty cool that it's made just for the drifter. That drifter is one of the. It's so realistic looking that I just think they're. It's even got the eyes on it. Like
yeah, I don't know if you guys can see that, but
and some of those combinations, are so natural, so realistic. You can almost match. Is that the one that's Smokey Joe? I think.
Yeah. Smoke one, yeah. You'll like that one. I know you'd like that one. So I picked that one out.
The little purple deal in the bottom of it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. But that they made that actually to throw the drifter on. I mean, that's something with that jig head. The flatty jig head. You could fish that in 2 feet. You could fish it in 30 feet, couldn't you? I mean, there's probably not a limit because I know I've caught fish on a lot of the different set the hook lures, anywhere from 5 feet to I caught fish at the Thousand Islands Open 2 years ago in 45, 50 feet of water in the St. Lawrence River. So obviously gobies, I mean, is your experience that gobies are all throughout the water column?
Yeah, they're on the bottom all the time, the gobies, but that's why guys are fishing, the drifters, because these gobies are hanging around these rock shoals, or they're just squirting on the bottom. There's just millions and millions of goby everywhere you look. Like if you're coming out of the marina, you're looking at the bottom, you'll just see gobies. They're everywhere, and then they'll primarily between like 50 and shallower is kind of where they're going to stick. That bottom, they don't go kind of deeper than that. You'll find them probably in 70, 80 feet, but primarily like 30 to 40 feet. That's where these gobies are kind of hanging out.
Let's hit a couple of these last ones real quick here from Robert again. He said it's called a flatty rig.
Yeah, flatty rig. Okay, sorry, I call it flatty jig, but yeah.
Flatty rig.
Thanks, Robert.
My buddy Lenny DeVos says the drifter.
Yeah, he'll know. He knows how to catch smallies.
I agree.
Or bass.
Video of Lenny throwing the drifter. I think it was this summer that they filmed it. That man, I mean, he caught some absolute freaking tanks on that thing, dude. Like
he's a good fisherman.
But that video that Lenny is catching them on, I'm not sure if it's on the Set the Hook website. If it's not, it should be. It's a freaking awesome video, dude. Alexander says, I see a lot of different drifter color variations. When would you want to use those off color patterns versus the juvenile color?
Well, I always say colors are for the fisherman, not the fish. So you kind of look at your surroundings, right? Like if you're catching a fish and he's spitting up gobies like a darker color, then obviously you're gonna put a darker one on because that's what they're on. I know on Simcoe, depends on where you are. There's some variants of darker gobies than lighter colored. But to be honest, it's all in what you prefer. I like the lighter colors sometimes, on different days, and then other days I'll just put the darker ones and just get as many fish. But the colors are made for fishermen.
I know about the smallies. I get to fish smallies up north a lot. I didn't get to this year because of all this craziness going on. But I will tell you one thing about smallmouth up there. Now, I haven't fished Simcoe, but I've fished Ontario. I've had quite a few top tens on Lake Erie and national events. Never got that W, but had quite a few top tens. Lake Ontario, St. Lawrence River, Lake Champlain, all that. But I can tell you the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, sometimes those smallmouth like black. I mean, black is my shirt. Black is my freedom shirt. They like just black. And I don't know if it's a contrast, because I've never seen gobies or smelt, obviously, or anything that's just straight black. I think it's just I don't know. It's just something that they don't like it, so they want to eat it. They don't have hands like we do to wipe something away from. You know what I mean? They got a mouth, and they're going to eat it.
Yeah.
But black is really good. But I either like, as far as the smallmouth, like I said, you're talking about the whitefish and that stuff too. But as far as the smallmouth, I either like black or real natural colors. You know what I mean? Like the stuff you're talking about, like the gobies, whether it's the Smoking Joe or any of those colors from set to hook. That's obviously the stuff that I like to use the most. But it's either like really natural or really heavy contrast. So kind of an interesting deal. Thomas says the darker drifter you'd use in February when the gobies go deeper and get slightly darker. Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll when I'm cutting up a whitefish, and I was checking the stomach because that's what I do. You'll have a variance of like lighter color gobies to dark. Like they're a mixed bag, and that's the thing. Some days are going after darker ones and lighter colors, and it could be where they are in the column. But
right. And one thing too that's and don't get me wrong, when I'm catching fish to eat them, I always cut the stomach open, whether it's a grouper or whatever it is. But there's one thing that I've noticed is that when you're picking your colors like that, the longer that forage, whether it's a goby or a smelt or a lobster in a grouper stomach, the longer it's been in that fish's stomach, it'll change colors more too. Like a lot of times, somebody will say, "Oh, I caught a bass and spit up a crayfish and it was really, really orange." Well, the stuff in the fish's belly turn it orange.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's really hard to say, oh, they're really orange. So, but the best way to do it is get a couple different colors, go fishing, try them. Yeah. I've seen days, I'm 46 years old, been fishing all my life. I've seen days when color made absolutely zero difference at all. And I've seen other days when it absolutely made a difference, without a shadow of a doubt. I wish I could bottle up and sell whatever makes which day I'm going to bite black and which day I'm going to bite a natural color better, because I would have won a lot more tournaments than I did.
That's why you got to buy every color, because you never know, right? That's the thing.
Well, Justin, man, I appreciate you being on here. We have run out of time with this American Baitworks Live. You have given us an hour of absolutely invaluable information on Lake Simcoe. I have talked so much about Lake Simcoe. I've got some buddies that live up there. I am definitely going to get up there. I don't know if I'll get up there and go ice fishing, but hey, as long as we're an ice hut and I got the proper clothes, I'm in. I would love to do. I would love to catch a big lake trout through the ice like that.
I'll have you set up. Don't worry. You come up, we'll set you up. We'll make sure you're nice and warm when you come up. Don't worry about that.
Absolutely. Well, Justin, like I said, thank you from all of us here at American Baitworks. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for stopping in. And we will be around, I think, again next week, Wednesday, 6 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. If I am, everybody check out all the Facebook pages. You can find out when our next one is. Justin, thanks so much, man. I appreciate it, buddy. We are out.